attack on civil liberties have been going on for a long time. They've got much worse in the last 10 years, especially since 9/11. It was shortly after 9/11. Understandably, we were all very, very concerned about what was happening, but I don't think the analysis was very good. It was considered almost treasonous to suggest that maybe 9/11 had something to do with the phenomenon described by the CIA and the Defense Department, the thing called blowback. Maybe that had something to do with it. Instead of addressing the problems that we have with our foreign policy and see the connection, the attack and the correction has been the attack on the American people. So the first bill that passed after 9/11 was the Patriot Act. So that too should be high on our list for repealing legislation. When that bill was being passed, I remember it clearly because I was sitting on the House floor talking to another member, and there weren't very many of us that voted against it. So he was obviously voting for it, and I said, "Why are you voting for this?" And he says, I said, "You probably haven't even read it because it only been out on the floor about an hour or so." He said, "Oh no, I haven't read it." And I said, "You know, it'll probably have a lot of bad stuff in it." He said, "Yeah, I know that too." And I said, "Why are you going to vote for it?" He said, "Because it's called the Patriot Act." He says, against the Patriot Act under these conditions, what would I tell my people back home? I said, "Well, that's your job. You go home and explain it to them why you need to vote no." But I'm sure you're aware of the fact that if you see the title of a bill going through the Congress, it probably has a title that is exactly opposite of what it's going to do. So, if the bill had said repeal the Fourth Amendment, maybe they wouldn't have gotten so many votes for that. So, next year or so, we have that chance. The bill will say restore the Fourth Amendment Act and repeal the Patriot Act. Why there's been a systematic attack on our liberties. One is that, and one that none of us like to admit, it's a lot our fault. We've been careless, we've been apathetic and lackadaisical about it, and they do these things and we don't hear about it, and they've gotten away with it. That is what I think is changing. I don't find people like you and an audience like this as being lackadaisical when it comes to protecting freedom, and that's the good news. Certainly, the one item that we have been pursuing now, essentially since the early 70s, has to do with the enforcement of drug laws. And that has led to a couple things. First, we spent a lot of money, probably $3 to $4 trillion. Second, it hasn't done any good whatsoever. Matter of fact, I think that war on drugs is more dangerous than the drugs themselves. Yeah. Has made for danger on our borders, on our southern border. There was like 50,000 people got killed over drug wars over the last 5 years or so. So it is very, very dangerous. But it's dangerous to our liberties. It's these SWAT team operations, dozens and dozens. They claim every single day around the country at all levels of government. And it's always to do good, to make people behave and make sure that they don't hurt themselves. At the same time, they're destroying our liberties and undermining and not solving their problems. Drug usage hasn't been solved, the problem of drug usage. Matter of fact, drug addiction is much worse with prescription drugs than it is with the illegal drugs. Stories when SWAT teams barge in and break the doors down. Lo and behold, sometimes they go into the wrong apartment, and sometimes they kill innocent people, and sometimes they destroy property. And yet we're supposed to accept that? I say no, we shouldn't accept that. We should protection of our liberties from our government. That is what we should be doing. And another downside on the enforcement of the drug laws is that I consider this one area where there's still a lot of discrimination in this country. There's a lot of talk about the race wars going on and the fighting and the squirming around, but sometimes I think they miss the point where real discrimination occurs. And I believe it's the enforcement of the drug laws. I believe that. Likely to be arrested and imprisoned and fined and penalized compared to if you happen to be a celebrity and you have money and you have a different color, you have a different way of getting around the system. Yeah. So one of my daydreams have been, and I think it's still possible it's going to happen, is just like in the 1930s, the early 1930s, the country woke up and said, you know, this prohibition of alcohol is for the birds. Let's repeal prohibition. And that, of course, is what we should do. But the point about drugs is it's a bigger point than just the drug issue. It's about liberty. Who is supposed to be responsible for your safety and you taking care of yourselves and what habits you have? If you use drugs or alcohol, obviously if you do harm to others, you need to be penalized. You need to be in prison or whatever. But if somebody is using drugs and the government comes in and causes all this harm, this is a different problem. I, for one, think drugs are very, very dangerous. As a matter of fact, not only do I think the so-called illegal drugs are dangerous, I think the legal drugs are very dangerous too. I happen to. But you know, there is one area of drug usage which opens the door more to a better understanding, and that is the states that want to and have legalized the medical use of marijuana. Same category as freedom of choice on you deciding whether or not that might help the person medically, as I would say that you ought to have the right to make your own decision on whether or not you want to drink raw milk. But it really goes back to who's to protect us from ourselves. It is only us that can do that. Everything that we do, every habit we do, everything that we eat, drink, smoke, or whatever, it is up to us. But it's up to us also to teach our children or the doctors of the community, try to instruct and show where the danger is. But to say that the nanny state will solve our problems and let the government and the bureaucrats and the regulators spend $3 trillion in the last 40 years and have no success, it's time to call it off. It's time to